No, when you think about it.
3:30.
I'm so
sad.
I'm gonna fight someone. This is illegal.
Is it?
Not allowed.
By who?
I will fight.
How much sleep did you get last night?
Well, here, you see, it's kind of a funny story.
Here.
It's like,
Here.
I went to my neighbor's room.
Oh, the.
They were sort of like hung out. They were trying to finish an essay, and I kept falling asleep, so I like kept waking them up. And suddenly I fell asleep, and then I woke up. It was 3. Then I had to shake them awake because they'd fallen asleep. No, we're getting into bed. No, we're going to sleep, and you're going to finish this in the morning.
I had a note though, which I apparently misplaced. I didn't actually finish giving you the big run-up that Jefferson was leaving. Did I?
Everything's a mess.
3:30 on Wednesday.
That was about the fanciest dab I've ever done.
It is 70 minutes.
It's actually really hard.
What are all the questions and all the answers?
Alex, no.
You're smart.
It's really hard. I can test to it. It's real hard. After the whole 70 minutes.
This is different. This one is different. There's so many words.
I'm scared.
No, we don't do that one.
I wrote like
Get
3
it.
pages of the essay. In a tiny little book. What do you mean?
How did you do? What did you erase?
I got an A on that.
Oh, excellent.
Hey, do you want to send me those notes on the study guide that you have?
No.
And I will pay you.
This is on the page.
Just all the stuff that you put in?
No, I just put that in your section. Pay attention in class.
I don't. Well, I do. I
So,
forget.
yes,
And I
Wednesday, 3:30 in the auditorium. You will have 70 minutes. Most students don't go the whole 70 minutes. Well, that's time that you don't know.
Okay.
Can this please be a prank?
So if you show up at, I don't know, 4:30.
Like Lisa prank? Because Pop.
If you show up at 4:30, then, you have about 20 minutes more to take it. That'll be a little tight.
I'm not planning.
I would say most students will go about 45 minutes. 70 minutes total. Huh?
What is the first question?
What are all the questions?
So,
And all the answers?
half of your grade will be the essay portion, half the grade will be the other sections.
What other sections are there? Are they multiple choice?
You start editing your pictures. I just have all 5 pictures up.
It's a mix of things.
Pressure me.
There's some short response, there's some choice, there's some, I guess what you call matching. There's 3 sections. It's by hand.
Okay, I get it. Stop bugging me.
Crossword puzzle.
Wait, can we just
Can it please the entire thing be a crossword puzzle?
It's a
I'll fail it. I mean, if it has a word bank.
Big crossword. It's written on.
I'd rather have the giant crossword without a word bank than the test.
So bad I don't know any of this shit. I would rather write an essay because I can bullshit my way through an essay.
But you can't just like look for words. It's like, oh, that looks like a word. That looks like a name.
Yeah, but you don't know if you're right. With an essay, you just bullshit and go on and on, and something's got to be
So I
right
will
in
finish
there.
the thought I was giving you the other day. Did I? Let me.
Oh, we just never finish anything and jump off the page.
I'm going to erase the bureaucracy.
Oh boy.
Kill it.
This is the U.S. government.
Why do not sleep? I do. That's not a thing. That is good.
I'm dying.
I need more coffee.
I'm dying.
I need caffeine.
So remember, hold on. Just the last thing. Remember the context here was Jefferson, who wanted to not have a large military, then comes up against the problem with the pirates off the north coast of Africa, and then between 1800 and 1805, 59 American soldiers are captured by the British and then put into the British Navy. And the reason for that was that the British were very sore losers, and they didn't admit that American citizens are actually American citizens. They're like, no, you're still British subjects.
Me at life.
But then, all the way from 1806 to 1812, 469 American sailors are pressed into the. These are actually not sailors. These are actually ships, the whole ship. 59 ships and then 469 ships of sailors being pressed into the British Navy. And so the Americans will react and say, well, clearly we can't have the British Navy pushing us around like this. We need to push back. And the U.S. ends up in the War of 1812. And they realize that it was one thing to have this kind of, yes, we would love to just trade with Britain and everyone get along, but the practical side of things is that wasn't working out very well. How long did the war be? 3 years. It ends in 1815.
When is it?
Oh, wait. Between what years did they have to form it?
So that's 400. It's 59 ships between 1800 and 1805, and then 1805 to 1807. 469 ships. That's about one half of the American merchant fleet was captured, just in a 2-year time span. 05 to 07. Well, the War of 1812 was a huge disaster. The Americans lost virtually every battle. But they're very, it's usually described as America lost the war but won the peace. So all of the battles go in the British direction. It's ultimately fought to a draw. So neither side actually, officially wins, but they go to the peace table to end the war. And the Americans, for some reason, come out with like all these great advances. You would have thought that they actually won the conflict, but in fact, they didn't do so well. In fact, the British actually invade and burn Washington D.C. to the ground. That's true. Until September 11, 2001, the United States had not been invaded, except by the British in the War of 1812. Oh, that's how many soldiers were, how many American merchant ships were captured by the British and its occupants pushed into the British Navy between 1800 and 1805. So it starts off 5-year period, relatively small in number compared to what's coming later, though that's still a lot. That's like one a month. And then in a 2-year period, 1805 to 1807, 469 American merchant ships, which is about half of the fleet, was captured by the British. So this is setting up what some people described as the British trying to undo the American Revolution. And the country didn't collapse the way the European powers thought it would. And the idealism of trading didn't turn out quite the other way the Americans thought it would. And the idea of not having to worry about having a standing army and navy also didn't quite work out the way they thought it would. And so the War of 1812 is kind of a test in several different directions. It will also be in that period, it will be the death of the Federalist Party because they're going to actually call this big meeting and they kind of conspire. They were always pro-British, and so going into the War of 1812, suddenly the U.S. is at war with Britain. The Federalists are kind of sore losers. some respects kind of reflecting the kind of Hamiltonian outlook. He wasn't very good loser either. Until he did, actually lose a duel. That is Chernow's interpretation of that event. That's true. Ron Chernow is the guy who is the historian who is the basis for
secondary sources.
Yeah, right? I want to see the primary source documents to tell me that he actually He was talking about the guy who wrote the libretto. Yes. That's what you call the book that goes with the musical.
Wait, that thing
you know the big hardcover thing they gave you? That's called a libretto.
I was hoping it's a book. I'm going to jump.
I mean,
I just want to do
That's so sad. I just want to do well.
What?
Oddly true.
Yes, that's what they, because libretto is like Negro book, right? That's the kind of book that
I don't want to go to any of these classes.
Are you ready for the thingy tomorrow?
But no one else got anywhere close. So
The gym?
No, what?
The swimming thingy.
Oh, I need to get a swimsuit. That fits me.
The reason you would do that is so that you're kind of like this high school student.
I'm going to buy a pie and run.
Cast. You missed a part! You skipped this whole line! Yeah, but it's not the same thing.
yeah, we have
I want to do.
We already had it.
Oh, I bet you could turn it into fun.
That would be beautiful.
Yeah.
Except what? What?
I love Amy.
What'd she say?
She's Smith is like, you could turn it into like Dawn's Lay Fizz.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, Lay Constitution. And I'm like, my dear,
No.
my love.
Yes,
You're doing
Les
great.
Miserables is always shortened to Les Mis. So he did it.
Hello, did somebody say?
The suffering of physics.
I hear the people sing. I hate myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to die. Yeah.
I need more coffee, please.
Just go buy some.
No, that's all the way close to the cafeteria.
To go to the bathroom and
The
just go buy
Constitution of the music.
Leaves to go to the bathroom, comes back with a cup of coffee.
Just pretend you took off your sweatshirt, grab the coffee, and then you're good. It's just common sense by Thomas Paine.
I hate myself. I want That's not the tab I wanted to be open.
Okay, thank you. You asked a question. So,
Okay.
yes, you should know the Bill of Rights pretty well, but we've kind of been, yes, that's the first 10 minutes. We have been doing this all along, so you should know them pretty well anyway.
Number 4.
Yes. Short answer is yes, you should know at least what each number is.
Oh,
Come on. Me and
No. Yes.
Wow, this is literally so irrelevant to everything I want to know.
What's that? Yeah, what's the context for it?
That's not what I want. Oh my god, what the heck?
Yes, but
I need to start
it's the
taking notes
same
off.
even with credit too. So debtors. Remember the problem in the in the 1780s with debt, and everyone's like, yes, we love Section 80, we love Section 10. Somebody who owed a lot of money couldn't just flee Delaware and go to Kentucky and say, I'm sure glad I escaped to Kentucky. Well, he could, possibly, but he might also run into Daniel or something.
Whoa.
Do they not teach Americana in grade school?
Isn't law.
The only Americana I know is the New Americana by Halsey.
Lost is interesting as allegories go because they have all of the major philosophers.
Hello, my name is George Orwell.
Lost, the television show.
Also, it's biblical.
Don't you remember it had?
Wow, look
It
at all
had
the stuff that's
Stowe
Has
and Locke. In fact, his name was John Locke.
Yeah, name's John.
Yeah.
John Locke, my baby.
That's the. Do any of you watch The Big Bang Theory? There is a reference to Lost that Sheldon makes, where he had this incredibly great
Why
line
can't,
that
oh my,
I can't remember the phrase.
why is it so expansive?
They were going out somewhere, or they were doing something, and he compared it to Lost, and somebody's like, I don't understand the reference. He says, yes, it was like it had so much potential, but it was really disappointing in the end. I think you're going to find that you are putting all of this effort into preparing for the Constitution, and then you're going to take it and go, it was kind of like Lost.
What?
No, what? Yeah, those things are indented because of the
Yes, please.
subheading.
Yeah, so do we have to know what section they're from, or what are basically know what it is?
I'm trying to get you to understand the context of the Constitution, what that might be. Yeah. Yes.
Then it has one about privileges and immunities, and it says like the citizens of each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens from the several states.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean if like we have privilege and we still have that privilege?
So this is where federalism comes in, and at times the courts have had to decide whether or not things transfer. So let's take the issue of marriage. Now, I'll go to gay marriage in a second. Let's just talk about marriage. If you're married in one state, you move to another state, that marriage is recognized across there because of that clause in the Constitution. It was one of the issues then when gay marriage emerged as to, well, okay, look, is only recognized in some states, and ultimately the Supreme Court said, it makes no sense. It has to be, if you recognize it in one place, it has to be recognized in one place. And the court was a bit rushed in a sense, socially. They weren't quite ready to actually reach that conclusion. But the case came before them, and they said, this is the way it has to be. So we had very fast results.
Marriage is a scam. Yes.
So that's interesting. That in theory,
This sounds like a scam.
I think it depends on what kinds of reciprocity agreements the countries have between each other. Reciprocity from reciprocally.
No, I
And
don't.
so it would depend on the treaties those countries have. So in theory, I know a number of people, Americans, who went abroad to actually get married with the expectation that they would be legally recognized as married.
Hashtag my grandparents.
In the U.S. I don't know how much of that matters based on these reciprocal.
What does it mean to be married? What does it change? Do you get relief on taxes?
I think in theory you could actually marry twice, because I know people who have done that as well.
Just find someone.
They'll have, so if you have, like, you're married to people from different countries, they'll have a wedding in both places. File the paperwork. Yes. There you go.
In front or
Yes.
So there's the class that features debate class. It's like it says that it protects members from criminal or civil liability in the performance of their legislative responsibilities. So like things that they say can't be public record.
Yes, so in other words, this is an interesting clause because if you're a politician and in the course of your responsibilities, you cannot be prosecuted for anything that you do. There's a kind of immunity while you're in office on prosecution. That way people can't just you can't be kind of a guy who's making some kind of big speech or undertaking some kind of activity like, say, visiting Cuba. You're a senator, you're working on the Foreign Service Committee, you make a visit to Cuba, and then the other members of the Senate and the House decide they want to make it illegal for people to visit Cuba. And because they want to get you or they want to prosecute you would be under that clause. They can't actually do that because it was in the course of your responsibility. That doesn't mean you could break the law. That's a different matter.
It's like, you know how in like the X-Files when they like make people throw other people so it's legal, right? Because like they like take someone, but it's part of their like responsibility.
I think I missed that episode.
It's sort of like a theme throughout. But it's legal.
Are we talking about elected officials?
Yeah. I understand.
Because that clause is not necessarily supposed to apply to people in the executive branch. If they're doing their responsibility as to, you might be able to apply it. But the idea here is that people should not be punished for doing what it is they've been told to do within the regular responsibilities of government's functions. The dates of the amendments? Short answer is no, I don't know. Time. It would help that you know if you know that their meeting was at Independence Hall, Philadelphia, in December 1787. Because that helps you keep some perspective in terms of, well, because if you're looking at the 1780s and the problems with the 1780s, it helps to know that, you know, Shays Rebellion is in 1786, and they're meeting for the Constitutional Convention in the summer of 1787. Even cooler if you know it was in Independence Hall, Philadelphia. But then you also know then that they ratify it, and then they have the first elections in 1788.
Where did they live?
They elected, including George Washington. So after they leave the convention, the ratification process starts at the end of 1787 into 1788. And they were following the procedure within the Constitution, which requires 3/4 of the states. It's actually quite fast as amendments.
Oh, yeah, wait, yeah, what's it?
1787 to 1788.
Okay.
And then they have, in the summer of 1787, they have the convention, and by November of 1788, they're already having the first election.
That is fast.
That might be the fastest our government has ever worked. It hasn't worked that fast since then.
So from 1776 to 1788, who is like leading the 13th colony? Was it just like the colony?
So they still have the Articles of Confederation. So even while they're meeting in Philadelphia, the Articles of Confederation are still in force. And because Philadelphia was actually still the seat of government, you in a sense kind of have these people meeting on the outskirts of town, while the other government is actually still in force. the anti-federalists are much more suspicious. Not everyone is necessarily seeing this as a subversive exercise of overthrowing the government. Everyone agreed that there's something needed to be done.
You know how like in the pocket video, Congress adjourned before it was over, and the building was the Congress?
Yes.
So what does that mean that Congress is adjourning? Like, are they like something like in an ongoing session?
Yes, so in fact, if you were to look to see what Congress is actually doing, they always number it by session. And they'll tell you we are in session number 113, or 113, whatever. And each Congress meets for 2 years. So you can have and then the sessions can also be broken up into first session or second session, and then there's a recess in the middle. So you'll have the first section of the 113th Congress, the second session of the 113th Congress. Usually now they actually have 2 big recesses and goes into a third session over the course of its 2 years. Well, there's an election. I mean, that's built into our system. So, for example, I'm going to draw something I showed the morning class students, and I think it was helpful. I never thought of doing it before, but somebody asked a question. And I think this kind of graphic representation is helpful. Again, geez, I've just destroyed more bureaucracy than Donald Trump. So we'll make a kind of line here.
Wow, this tea tastes like soap.
Yeah, who needs a CDC? NOAA, NIH, we don't need those. And atmospheric administration. Yeah. The director of which was our graduation speaker 2 years ago. She was awesome. Yes, here.
Does Mr. Smith have a crush?
No, here. What? Actually, let me tell you about. Catherine Sullivan is her name. Let me tell you about Catherine Sullivan. What I really thought was quite interesting about Dr. Sullivan is that she didn't go to any EV institutions. She went to UC Santa Cruz for her undergraduate. Then she got a PhD from one of the Canadian universities.
Ew.
And not even Toronto. But not only was she a woman in science, but she, just by her own will, ends up director of NOAA and had been in space. She was actually the first woman to do a spacewalk. And she was also our graduation speaker, and she had these great stories. But what I thought was really interesting is that she was able to do all of this by bypassing, you did a kind of usually aspiring institution for everyone else. So every 2 years, this is a cycle. The cycle is always the same. We'll start with, let's not do it as Congress, let's do it as the House of Representatives. All House of Representatives members are up for re-election. 1/3 of the Senate and the President are all up for election. 2 years later, we have what's called a midterm because it's in the middle of the President's term. And you have, again, all the members of the House of Representatives, a different 1/3 of the Senate, and not the President, because the President is there for 4 years. Then we get to this one, and we have all members of the House of Representatives, yet another 1/3 of the Senate, and the President, because it's now been 4 years. And then the cycle starts over again. This is the same cycle all the time. Okay? That's always the cycle. And so then we get here, and then these people would finally, after 6 years, be up for re-election once again.
So why did they decide to have it so the House of Representatives only have, 2 years while the Senate has to?
That was part of the Great Compromise. So these are the people who are, remember, they're the ones representing the people. The people should have a right to vote them out. It's based on population, and they can vote them out after 2 years. They have 2 years and that's it. They're always up for re-election. They're also the ones in charge of the budget, whether it's the military or otherwise. These people are representing the states. And they had decided that, again, these people are indirectly elected. They're not even directly elected by the people, according to the original design. And they would always be going through this cycle, whether in 6-year terms. There's more, it was understood that the states would have this equivalency. They're all equal to each other in the Senate. And there would be more continuity in the member body. Well, originally, the state legislatures. So at the state level, whoever you're electing to your legislature, they would elect the senators. And so they tended to be picking each other to be in the Senate. And so with an amendment, the 16th, if I remember correctly, they changed that and decide that from now on, the people will directly elect their senators too. But so that doesn't change till the 20th century.
I was going to ask, like, I don't know if this is a silly question or not, but, like, how do they decide, like, which 1/3 of the Senate to elect? Like,
so initially, so in 1788, when they first meet, they actually have to decide which people are going to, even though they're senators, are only going to serve 2 years and then be up for re-election in order to get the cycle going. And that's what they did. Okay. So they said some of you are going to be a third, or some of you are going to be 2 years, some of you will be 4, some of you will be 6. And it was by lottery.
So I was going to say, like, it's not fair, so they're just like, all right, you're out.
And now if you admit a new state, they will do the same kind of thing. They'll figure out where that state should fit in the cycle, and then their senators will be kind of assigned into where that cycle should be to make sure. So we'll always, because there are 100 of them, it's always going to be 33, 33, 34. So there's always, obviously we can't have, this year, you're going to be like 1/3 up for re-election. You can't do that. So obviously it's 33, 33, 34.
Are public representatives and senators familiar to, like, the
No. There's been lots of discussion over time about putting term limits. I had an interesting conversation with, I always get interesting observations about the American political system from people in England. In part because the thing about the British, this is true.
Oh boy.
They write incredible histories. Right? When they're historians in Britain write really good stuff, except when Britain is involved. And then it suddenly becomes incredibly biased, and you can't count on them for anything. And so they're not very good at reflecting upon themselves. So they love to come on other people's political systems, and then they ignore the fact that they don't have a written constitution and all this other stuff. But anyway, so a friend of mine, we were talking about term limits. He said, I find it so fascinating, or as you put it, I find it so fascinating that the Americans.
Is he British?
What do you think?
He's Australian.
Scottish.
No, he's actually Mancunian. You know what that puts in? That's the adjective. Manchester. Yeah. They have their own northern accent.
Does he play football? But like football?
Of course he plays football.
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 Or does he play American football?
No, they're American football. Anyway, so can I finally get you? It takes so long to get there. There would be no payoff. So his question was, aren't term limits basically anti-democratic? Because if the will of the people is to keep people in office, then if you put limits, like, aren't you kind of taking away the will of the people to keep the person there?
People change.
It's an interesting question, of course, because it suggests all kinds of things about the political system. People tend to blame everyone else's congressman and never their own. And then all I have to do, like in Illinois, I mean, it's easy to have a conversation about term limits because all I have to do is say Mike Madigan, and everyone is like, yes, term limits, I get it. It's not anti-democratic at all. Quite the opposite. You don't know who Mike Madigan is? Oh, okay, well, at the end of the class we were talking about the fact that Mike Madigan is the Speaker of the House in the state of Illinois. He is the longest serving Speaker of the House in American history. He has been there for 46 years.
Ew.
That's like more than I'm allowed.
Just a little bit.
You know, the problem with having favorite Illinois governors is that...
Is that?
What, 4 of 6 living governors were in prison? I mean, so, good luck with that.
Yeah, so can they be reelected?
Who?
Anyone.
Yeah, so these people, if we're talking about the federal level, these people can stay in there forever. There are no term limits on federal
Become immortal.
representatives. Some states will have term limits, but not at the federal level. We don't have that. Oh, and so the other thing I was going to, the Senate is part of the other part of the Congress. The other thing I was going to tell you, so this 2-year period, each one of these Congresses will be split into sessions. You know, first, second, third sessions, and then they take these breaks in between. And so if you were to actually look at the books, when they publish the records of the Congress, they come out by session. And it's been like that since at least the 1920s.
What about during times of war? Do they still get the session? Like,
They're always meeting.
They're always meetings, or like the times between the sessions? It's not like a 1 week.
Well, remember I told you one of the peculiarities up until the modern era was that these sessions, first, second, and third, are not happening right after the election. So the election is in November, but the session doesn't actually start the following December. So you're looking at a 13-month period. So if we were to turn this into an actual, if we wanted this to be an actual timeline, then we would say, well, okay, so here's 2 years, right? But the actual session doesn't start until here, and then there's the second session, and then the third session, right? And then there's another election before the third session is even. So you have this huge long lame duck.
Do they have voting for soldiers that are using active duty?
Yes.
What about astronauts?
They file absentees. What?
What about astronauts? Can astronauts vote?
I do not think we've run into a situation where people were held back from voting because of that, by reason of their being in space. But in theory, you should be able to file an absentee ballot.
What about Louis Armstrong?
Louis Armstrong, the trumpet player? That's Neil Armstrong.
Our trumpet players not allowed to.
I love the idea that Louis Armstrong made it to the moon and he was playing trumpet.
There's no sound in space.
There is in his spacesuit. There's plenty of oxygen in the spacesuit.
No room for a trumpet. Have you seen that?
It's a really crazy looking spacesuit.
What have they started? What have they begun?
Okay. So other sessions, they meet every 8 months since it's a 24-month period.
They determine their own schedule, and it's probably more or less about that amount of time. But the recesses can be long. So usually they're looking at like 6 weeks to a month where they're not in session, and then they come back. If you ever go to Washington, D.C., it's actually a good idea to figure out where they are in the session, because if you want a cheap hotel, you go when they're not in session.
What about Venus flytrap?
When they're in session, all the prices go up, because that's when all the lobbyists are around. Actually, it's also true that the most expensive housing market in the entire country happens to be on the Virginia side, right outside of Washington, D.C., because that's where all the lobbying companies' executives live. Other questions?
This doesn't know what a lobbyist is.
What's a lobbyist?
We have people out there like, hey, you should corrupt the government with
These are people who are paid to go, and usually they had some kind of position in Washington so people know who they are. And they're paid to go and actually set up meetings and try to apply some kind of pressure on a policy.
I think she like goes through it.
If they would sell Mount Vernon. If they would sell Mount Vernon.
Sell Mount Vernon to you? No, not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. What does that mean?
Well, I don't know. When you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying.
Yeah, they think it's like annoying for politicians to like have lobbyists coming to them all the time, like, hey, you should go for this or whatever.
Being a politician is very stressful. It's hard.
I don't know, because that just feels like, yeah, just
It depends on your district. My congressman doesn't meet with constituents. I bet it's very not stressful at all. He has no idea what anyone thinks. Doesn't seem to care what anyone thinks. He just goes about his business. And he's been doing that for 6 years and seems to be perfectly happy with it. Nope. No. That's right. It's extra constitutional. Outside. But parties are too. The parties aren't in the Constitution. Oh, do you know how much I would love if we said parties are not constitutional, we should get rid of them? Wow, that would be awesome.
Everyone would die.
It would be, well, a whole lot of people would end up having brain aneurysms. I don't know what to think. I need to think for myself. They're going crazy. There's lots of people walking on blood coming out their ears.
Me at life.
We can sell tiers of politicians.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have
Or
people
you
over.
get a discount.
Wow, your houseplants are doing so beautifully. Always feeding them tears of politicians. They love it. Oh, this one from the Southern Congressman happens to be particularly effective with my ficus.
Waterboard the politicians and then you put water in.
Ficus trees are
I'm so
especially
glad I have this all on video.
any kind of change. Like as soon as you move them, all the leaves fall off. Like, why did you do that?
They actually make high C by waterboarding double stroke and it comes off as like a sweet orange.
Wait, what?
One more time?
Wait, because like like the way they make high C is they waterboard chunks and then they add flavor to it.
Oh, I see.
Not color, not color though.
Is that the artificial coloring? No, don't do it. Oh no.
Come on.
To your plants.
I just quote that part.
You need to ask questions. That's how you avoid failing the
I think I understand it. You come to talk about stuff and suddenly you don't understand it. I don't know what I don't understand. I don't know what I don't know. How do I learn something I don't know yet?
Oh, we were perfectly fine until you started talking, Smith. Shut up.
Isn't that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
We need to know about the how the Article of Confederations relates to the Constitution.
Yes. How does it relate?
Like the fact that like out of the Articles of Confederation first was like America's Constitution, and then because all of like the Federalists and Federalists and like the way things were going with the Articles of Confederation and how like everything had to be like unanimous and stuff like that.
Exactly.
They decided to write a constitution.
All right, you're doing well so far. You and Thomas should talk later. You're on the wrong sides of the room. Put you both in the center. What about the debates? What do you know about debates about the Constitution? What kind of debates? Which one? The debate? I'm guessing not. Marbury versus Madison? Oh, that's an interesting one. It's not the one I had in mind, but that's interesting.
It had nothing to do with it.
No, I mean actual debates about the Constitution. What kinds of debates would there have been? So there are the compromises. You learned about 4 of them. What else? What else do we know? Federalists and anti-federalists. So there were actually more, but those are the ones that I tend to focus on. So there were debates. So in addition to the problems with the articles, you also had these other discussions about what it is they want to replace.
Do the Democratic Republicans because like they weren't like for they weren't federalists and they weren't anti-federalists.
Except remember, the only thing is, remember that the 2 parties, the Democratic Republicans and the Federalists, come not only after the Constitution, but after George Washington is out of office.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So yes, they have some earlier forces. So obviously Hamilton is leading what becomes the Federalist Party. But Madison ends up being in the Democratic Republicans with Jefferson.
Supposed to be government by people. It feels like the conceptual separation between government and people is even further than like Republicans and liberals.
There was this early 20th century, maybe even late, no, it's like 1905, this journalist, and he described the U.S. government back then as a government by the rich or the rascals by the scoundrels. And what's interesting is that, you know, if you go by public sentiment now, public opinion polls, it looks like it hasn't actually changed over the last 110 years.
That is sad.
I think it's funny how like you said that one time like the anti-federalists were more organized. Like it's just like crazy to think how they might have.
They were initially, but then they end up being the first ones to bite the dust.
Yeah.
I mean, the Federalists disappear because, well, in part, we could say that the Federalists may have won the debate about the Constitution, and the Federalists may have won the debate about the Bill of Rights. But the Federalists lose the discussion about the first party system. And the Jeffersonians, the Democratic Republicans, who, again, don't necessarily see them as anti-federalists because the Constitution is enforced, but they had some of their sentiments, they ultimately win the argument in the long run. So yes, okay, you got your strong federal constitution, but you know when it came to putting it in practice, wow, you people were a bunch of jerks. Yeah. Just the first 10. We will. Okay, I could have said Bill of Rights. My other question would be, how do you make an amendment?
Wait, would we have 102 senators if we get another?
What?
Would we have 102 senators if we get a new state?
Yes, in theory.
In theory?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you admit another state and we don't lose one, like for example, if by the end of the 21st century, when Florida is underwater and we lose a state, but then we bring in Puerto Rico because it has enough mountains that it can still be a state, then we just like are trading one for one, and the Senate composition doesn't change.
Why is Hawaii a state?
What if
Is that
Hawaii. Because people like things. Wow. Deep.
I mean, Indian politics.
Yeah, no, I'd be more concerned about Florida being underwater.
They're all old habits.
According to my National Geographic map.
It's actually supposed to be everything west of insert highway here.
It's been all the ice melts. And that, the capital of Florida, becomes a coastline.
Good, no one likes Florida, Jesus.
Florida isn't real.
Florida is
The
trash.
Australia of the United
And the
States.
entire Central
What is
Valley-
the Australia? The Australia?
Australia. The outback.
Well, yeah, they don't take the earthquake into consideration. But suppose if it flooded and they got an earthquake, then we would have like the island of California.
Why would the
Actually, it would be everything west of insert highway here.
If the earth is flat, then how would the water get
Do you have any primary sources that
Okay, very quickly. Google Earthwise. Earthwise. It's a famous photo.
Oh, it's a photo. It doesn't sound like.
wait, what?
Photoshop.
Yeah, see, I was like, that's kind of fun. It's
Can I? Roll down.
See, yes, that's what I'm saying. See, it's not really flat, it's just a semi-circle.
So does that mean that the other side isn't real and that China is fake?
That would explain me.
So, in order to have an amendment, there are two ways. I didn't tell you this already? There are two ways to have an amendment. Only one of them is
I don't get it.
the usual way is 2/3 of both chambers of Congress have to agree. And then, no, it can't. No, this is an amendment. And then 3/4 of the states have to ratify what the Congress just passed. So it's supposed to be difficult. Right? So 2/3 of the state, 2/3 of both chambers, and then 3/4 of the states. The other way is to say, wait a minute, the federal government can't actually be trusted to amend the Constitution. Therefore, there is another way, which is 2/3 of the states call constitutional conventions and draft a amendment. And then they send it out to the rest of the states, 3/4 of them, to actually ratify it. And you bypass the Congress. Wait, you did.
Like our representatives, state representatives,
No, at the state, in the state, not at the federal level. So the members of the House and members of the Senate, they're in the federal government. I'm talking about at the state level. No, the two proportions are the same. So it's always 3/4 of the states to ratify, but it's either 2/3 of both chambers or 2/3 of the states. And it doesn't say anything about the form that those constitutional conventions are supposed to take. So it could be the state legislatures themselves passing an amendment. It could be the people themselves bypassing their own state government and just calling the constitutional convention. No, I tried to avoid them. No, it's closer to like 750,000. Yes, so what they do is every 10 years when we have a census, and they shift the numbers of the representatives. Another thing that they do is they change that proportion in order to keep the 435. And they've been doing that every 10 years since like 1928.
Why do they only want to compare?
That's a really good question. So this proportion that we have of one representative for almost every 1 million residents is an incredibly high number. Most other democracies have much lower proportions. The only other country actually that has a higher proportion than the U.S. is India. So some people have suggested that, obviously the original the original idea of having a one representative for every 10,000 is not practical. But I've seen it suggested that we should perhaps have closer to 600 representatives instead of 435. And I would say, well, even though 600, you might even be able to go a little bit higher than that. But anyway, there's no reason why we have to stay at 435, but we have. There were a few years ago, and I guess we're out of time. A few years ago, there was a chance to create representatives for DC, and they were going to give an extra one to Utah, and they couldn't get it together. There was just this disagreement.
Utah isn't real.
All right, so I will be around tomorrow, but it's going to be long. You may have to look for me because we are interviewing for a new project on our department.